announce the awards. We happen to have the grand prize gold winner in our audience today. She'll be reading out of this book for you, Amy Gigi Alexander. The awards have 21 categories in addition to the grand prize top 3. Among those category winners, and hold your applause until we get to the end, are a lot of names of people who are here. Let's see, Amy Gigi Alexander, Lisa Alpine, Jill Robinson, Lavinia Spalding, Keith Skinner, Barbara Robertson is here, I believe, in the back. Kimberly Lovato. Who else am I missing? Who can I spot? Bill Zarchi is here. Hi, Bill. Bill Zarchi also won an award. So anyway, that's about a dozen people here today who won awards in the Solus Awards. I want to congratulate them and thank all of you for coming out and being here to hear some great travel literature today. Now, with that, I'd like to introduce Don George. I don't need to say a whole lot about Don because everybody knows Don, but Don he's been around in the travel editing, travel writing world of the Bay Area since the Pleistocene age, I think. Don is the travel editor.
That's enough.
Get it up there. Give it up. All right. Well, Don is beloved by the writing community here, and he has been the travel editor of the San Francisco Examiner, Examiner and Chronicle, the Global Network Navigator, Travelers Center, AOL, the online, the travel editor. He's a Wanderlust for Salon. He's BBC Wanderlust now. He's been all over the map, and he's worked for Lonely Planet for many years and has numerous books out with Lonely Planet. So I'm going to bring Don up here now. He's going to read a little bit from his introduction, and the rest of the readers will then take you away. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Larry. It's not easy dragging a 700,000-year-old body around. But I wanted to be here, so.
Yay.
So I just want to say what an incredible honor it was for me to, when Larry invited me to write the introduction to these books. I think I was present at the birth of Traveler's Tales a few years ago as a company. It's a wonderful company, led by wonderful, wonderful people. It's a brilliant concept that continues to enrich the literary landscape, and it's I praise hugely Larry and his partners, James and Sean, because what they do is unique and wonderful and sustains us all. So thanks, Larry, for what you do. Since my introduction was so short, I said to myself, I think I can read the whole thing and consider it a snippet, so I'm going to try to read the whole thing. It's called Immersed in the Mud of Life. I've finally decided to unpack my hiking shoes. About a month ago, I returned from a week-long immersion in rural northern Cambodia. My mission had been to stay with a family in a stilt house in a village of unpaved paths, and to explore the ruins that waited in the surrounding jungle gloom. Because of time and travel constraints, I was visiting during the rainy season, but that didn't deter my explorations. Over the course of that week, I and my hiking shoes leapt over, and sometimes into, sudden streams, sloshed through ankle-deep puddles, glopped through 10-foot-long stretches of soul-sucking mud, crashed through clutching vines, stepped over furry millipedes, and stumbled on mossy picture puzzle pieces of massive rock carvings scattered on the jungle floor. By the end of this adventure, my shoes looked like they'd been dipped in milk chocolate. And as I sat in my fan-cooled cottage in Siem Reap on the last night of my adventure, packing for the 20-hour journey home, I briefly considered leaving my shoes behind. They had served me well, I reasoned, but they would not be serving me anymore. Then I realized that doing so would be like leaving a quintessential part of my adventure, a part of me, behind. So I wrapped each shoe in 3 plastic bags and stuffed them into the corner of my carry-on case. When I got home and unpacked, I placed the shoes, still securely shrouded in plastic, in my bedroom closet, thinking that I would figure out what to do with them later, at a time that would make itself known. For the past 2 hours, I've been sitting in my study, entranced by the stories in this anthology. And now, pieces have clicked into place inside me. And I've realized that the time has come to unveil the chocolate-covered shoes. I retrieved them from the closet and then, back in my study, heft one plastic-wrapped package and gingerly extricate the bags inside. Particles of mud, mini mementos of Cambodian dirt and rainwater, fall onto my hardwood floor. I reach into the innermost bag and grab a heel, grainy and grimy, and as dirt sprays around me, pull the left shoe out. Soon the right shoe is resurrected as well. I set the shoes like trophies on their plastic bags. They are spattered, splattered, scarred, and copiously caked in mud. And as I gaze at them, the jungle comes back to me. Or rather, I go back to the jungle. I feel the heavy humidity, the sweat pouring like an open spigot down my face and back. Hear the mosquitoes whining in my ear, slap at them ineffectually. Take my camera in sweaty hands to photograph an intricate carving of a voluptuous Khmer dancer on a 2-foot by 3-foot by 2-foot stone block, partly hidden among lush ferns. I'm again parting branches and vines, laboriously liberating myself from persistent stickers, wiping the sweat from my eyes, stopping for a precious swig of water, the mosquitoes whining, dancing on my neck and hands, stepping over tumbled pieces of rock, slipping and sliding, grabbing at branches to stop my fall, clambering over a half-intact wall to see a bas-relief story unfold before me, warriors and musicians and fish alive in stone. I slip again and narrowly avoid planting my palm atop a millipede. The hairy feeding nightmares are everywhere, and I recall what my guide said when I asked if they could harm me. Oh yes, if you touch one, you will die. Through a screen of green, I discern a wall, a doorway, a crumbling tower, a stony face, lips, nose, eyes at the top of the tilting stone. I fumble with my camera as rain starts to fall. First a pitter-patter on the forest canopy and then an insistent downpour that penetrates the branches and leaves and soaks me from the red bandana on my head to the invisible rubber soles of my shoes. My shoes. Suddenly I'm back in my study in a San Francisco suburb. The sun is shining. Hummingbirds are flitting in the dappled branches beyond my window. The whine of a distant lawnmower dances, stingless, in the air. And then the pieces snap together. Hiking shoes, travel stories. Both take us places we never expected to go. The book you hold in your hands offers a spectacular collection of hiking shoes. Among them, Jill Robinson transports us to an illuminating rest stop standoff with a black mamba snake in Namibia. And Lisa Alpine takes us deep into the everyday wonders of an Amazon backwater. Tanya Amachayev leads us on a rigorous journey to a remote Russian village in search of roots and relatives. Through Jeff Greenwald, we discover the vividly ventricled heart of a natural landmark in Arizona. Lavinia Spalding guides us on a bittersweet birthday celebration through Cuba. Aaron Byrne and Marcia DeSanctis excavate the layers of poignant pasts in Paris. Michael Shapiro searches for the soul of Dylan Thomas in Wales, and Amy Gigi Alexander maps the life-saving marvels that travel can sometimes confer. Like my shoes, like my shoes, all the stories herein are battered, spattered, scarred. They're immersed in the mud of life. And like my shoes, they've absorbed once inconceivable and now immeasurably enriching journeys. So I invite you to step into these stories, to embark on the magical, muddy adventures they hold. I can guarantee that you'll go places you've never imagined and unwrap lessons you'll never forget. So it's a wonderful book, and it's my pleasure to introduce Jeff Greenwald, who goes back to the Pleistocene age with me. I'm actually thrilled to be metaphorically sandwiched between Larry and Jeff because they're two of my very oldest, longest time friends. People I've been publishing for years, I've worked with for years, collaborated with for years, enjoyed their company for years, and so Jeff's the author of many, many books. He's a performance artist. He's a splendid, splendid human being, and an amazing writer, and an awesome friend. It's a great pleasure to introduce Jeff Greenwald.
No love is truer than the love between fossils. Embedded together for millions of years. We have seen epics rise and fall.
He was in your stomach.
Okay. And I in his and some other information, no doubt. So this is a really weird story for me because it's about exactly what we're talking about, geological formation. It's a story called Surfing the Millennia, and since it's so short, I'm just going to read the first two words. It really is short. We're going to read like it's okay. The afternoon before visiting the wave, we watched a madman stagger out of the desert. My friends and I were hiking back from Buckskin Gulch, part of the surreal Vermilion Cliffs National Monument on the Utah-Arizona border. Our permit for the wave was for the next day, but this poor soul had just been out there. He'd lost his way coming back. His eyes were wild and his broad-brimmed hat askew. I went up the wrong wash, he gasped, visibly calm as we showed him the path back to the parking lot. There's no trail. The maps they give you are fucking worthless. I've been lost for an hour and a half. At least he didn't die out there. Some people do. The wave may be one of the most visually stunning, ardently photographed features in the Southwest desert, but the Bureau of Land Management doesn't make it easy to find, or to find your way back. People come to the wave and expect to have that national park experience, says BLM Monument Manager Kevin Wright, who administers the area from his office in St. George, Utah. But there's no formal trail out there, or portable or drinkable water. And in the summer, it gets over 100 degrees. All of which, of course, is part of the appeal. The wave is a tangible hallucination, a convoluted corridor of multicolored, brilliantly striped sandstone. Its history dates back to Pangaea, the single giant continent that once covered the Earth. Back then, about 170 million years ago, the North American, try to imagine this, the North American and African plates were just starting to split apart at the hem, forming the new Atlantic Ocean. But dinosaurs roamed freely across the enormous sandy desert that covered the Southwest, all the land we now call Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. The dunes marched along, leaving layer after layer, says Ron Blakey, author of Ancient Landscapes of the Colorado Plateau. The dune that makes up the wave may have thousands of layers in it, and it's part of other dunes that also have thousands of layers. So the cross-bedding we see today may have billions of layers, each one representing the advance of a single sand dune. For more than 100 million years, those dunes were buried miles underground, where they hardened into a layer of rock called Navajo sandstone. Slowly, those layers were uplifted until a mere 4 to 5 million years ago, they breached through the ground. Water and minerals seeped into the now exposed sandstone, and the wind sculpted its surface. Over many millennia, it was painted and carved, creating the fantastic shapes and rainbow-hued stripes that now enliven desktop screensavers everywhere. The wave sneaked onto every landscape photographer's wish list in 2004 when it was featured in a German documentary called Faszination Natur 7 Seasons. Today, about a third of the visitors are from Europe, and these days, China and Japan. But seeing the wave in situ requires luck and planning. The BLM, which administers Vermilion Cliffs, uses a strict permit system to protect the fragile area from overuse. Only 20 people are allowed in each day. 10 permits are issued online 4 months in advance. The rest are awarded by lottery at the National Monument Office in Kanab, Utah at 8:30 a.m. During high season, March to November, as many as 120 hopeful people show up each day. All but 10 will leave disappointed. Bribes don't work. Tom Reep, 32, is a 9-year Army veteran who served 2 tours in Iraq. He's currently the point man for wave permit requests. Reep has an open flame tattooed on his arm and a deep affinity for the desert. But he has little patience for people trying to buy their way into the wave.
We've seen this guy before.
The monetary record is $2,000, Reep remarks, as he, right in my small group, hiked from Wire Pass parking area toward the wave. I have even had a lady on the phone ask me, well, what if I take you to dinner and a movie and we see what happens afterwards? Kevin Wright has also turned down multiple requests, from the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition to representatives of the Occupy movement who wanted to hold a candlelight vigil at the wave. Even National Geographic had to get a permit, he says reverently. We do give permission for research, science, and the public interest. Otherwise, we never make an exception. I can't think of a single case. Come on, I nudge. Not even the president? If the president wants a permit, Wright pronounces dryly, he will get one. We cover about 3 unmarked miles, meandering through a landscape pocked with vivid red and orange bumps and valleys, like acne writ large. The land is sparse but not bare. We pass sagebrush, twisted junipers, and hills bristling with Indian rice grass. After 90 minutes of rugged walking, a short sandy hill leads us up to the wave itself. It's a weird feeling to be approaching rock formation with the same anticipation one might feel at Angkor Wat or the Taj Mahal. This whole area is amazing, I remark. Will I even know the wave when I see it? You'll know it, Wright says. Thank you.
You do.
Who is it? I'd like to introduce my dear friend, one of the best writers I know, someone who I've known for many years, one of the real lights and luminaries of the Bay Area travel scene.
Lavinia Spalding.
Oh.
You nailed it.
Lavinia, you know it's all true. I'm so glad it was you. Come on up here, sweetheart. Your baby's not kicking too much.
That was such a sweet and sincere and personal introduction. Thank you. It's hard to follow Jeff Greenwald. Thank you very much for that wonderful intro. Thanks, Larry, for introducing my story. So this is I'm just going to read a short excerpt from a story called Feliz Cumpleaños that takes place in Cuba. I was there with my best friend for our 40th birthdays, and we were feeling a little frumpy and grumpy on this birthday. It was about 4 years ago. And all you need to know is we've just returned from a bar where she's been getting hit on by Cuban man after Cuban man who are insisting that they love her and asking for kisses and things like that. As we walked back from Casa de la Musica, Erin tells me she read in her guidebook that sex is the only thing not rationed in Cuba. And as our week on the island unfolds, we begin to see the effects of this. It doesn't feel seedy, though. There's something thick and sultry about it, but equally playful. It's in the way middle-aged men with unbuttoned shirts lean in doorways and watch women passers-by. How they flirt, smiling, eyes sparkling. But it's also in the way those women look back, flirt, sparkle. It's in the way those same men flirt with us. When we were younger, it would have made us squirm. Were we single and available for romance, it might make us nervous. But now, this attention is welcome. And we let ourselves soak it in, absorb it like expensive wrinkle cream. Of course we've read about jineteras and jineteros who trade sex or love for money, favors, the remote possibility of a life lived elsewhere. This doesn't feel like that. This just feels like a place where joy and sensuality and music are celebrated, the way capitalism is celebrated in my country. The next afternoon in the town of Cienfuegos, we walked the Paseo del Prado, a long tree-lined boulevard down to the pier, stopping to photograph the classic cars covered in house paint, shades of popsicle pink, orange, lime, grape. The day is hot and humid, and we are dripping but determined to make it to Punta Gorda. As we finally near the pier, a young guy rides by on a bicycle, slows down, and cupping one hand around his right man breast, looks me square in the eye and announces loudly and reverently, "Bueno." Did that just happen? I ask. "Oh, how sweet," Erin says, "but we should teach him to say it in English." "Hey," she calls after him, "it's nice rack." That evening at another Casa de la Musica, a lively salsa band plays, and Erin dances nonstop. "Why does everyone ask you to dance?" I whine, "and never me?" "Because I sit here chair dancing till someone takes pity on me," she says. When she stands up to be swung around by the translator who's claimed her for the evening. Then she stands up to be swung around by the translator who's claimed her for the evening. When we leave the club an hour later, we see the guitarist from the band crossing the street. "I'm going to ask for his autograph," I say, suddenly 14. On the liner notes of my CD, he scrawls his name, Robinson, and we chat. His English is practically perfect. Then his friend saunters up holding a guitar, and they serenade us on the sidewalk. After, they translate the lyrics. "When will I see you again? When the world turns over." The evening is warm, and people are out strolling on the Malecón, so we join them. After a few minutes, we pair off, and as I walk ahead with Robinson, I try to figure out how to broach the topic of his political situation. I want to ask everyone we meet about the situation, and Erin teases me about this. If I comment that a little girl is cute, she asks, "Do you want to ask her about her situation?" I do. I've done my share of reading about Cuban politics, but it's complicated and I want more. I want to know things I can't intuit or see in the streets. I want to know how things are changing with Obama in office, how they're changing with Raul Castro in charge. I want to know about limitations, expectations, shortages, and to what lengths they go. I want to understand why everyone is so friendly to Americans, while I feel, if not guilty exactly, genuinely sorry. I'm too afraid to ask, though, so we talk music. But after some time, Robinson opens up. Every Cuban, he tells me, has a second source of income, selling cigars, helping tourists, hawking CDs. It's the only way when you make the equivalent of $20 a month. "Can you imagine if Cuba changed?" Robinson asks at one point, his voice becoming higher. "Can you imagine?" 90% of Cubans want it to change, he tells me, but most won't allow themselves to even hope for it. They live each day identical to the day before, without dreams, because there's no chance of dreams coming true. "We have nothing," he says at one point, stopping the conversation. "We have no freedom, we have no money, we have no food, we have no clothes, we have no instruments. We have no. Then he pauses beneath a tree, takes a breath, and says, "If you and I got married, you could take me to Hollywood and introduce me to people." As the moon shines down on us, as Erin and her guitarist approach, I fumble awkwardly, sadly, for the words to explain why I can't do that, why it won't ever happen. I have a boyfriend. I have no connections in Hollywood. I couldn't. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry. From Cienfuegos, we take a bus south to Trinidad, where Erin becomes violently ill. I sit with her through the afternoon and evening, conjugating Spanish verbs. Canto, I sing. Canta, you sing. Cantamos, we sing. But Erin finally insists I go out. And within 60 seconds, I'm at yet another Casa de la Musica. This one is al fresca, just off the Plaza Mayor. The steps of the staircase leading up to the Iglesia Parroquial are filled with locals and tourists swigging beer and watching the show in the square below. Today is one of many Santeria holidays, and the performers, band members and dancers alike, are dressed in white from head to toe. I lean against a crowded bar and wait to order a beer, and before long I make friends. Torsten is German, Angelica is Swiss, her husband Orlando is Cuban. Angelica tells me that when she and Orlando were courting, he was arrested for talking to her on the Malecon. There are cameras everywhere, she tells me. Be careful. Later I'll learn none of these cameras actually work. We dance, drink, and at the end of the night, Torsten asks if he can kiss me. Though I say no, definitely not. I'm beginning to see how this place can change you, make you feel more desirable, more alive. It turns you the way it wants to, gently, like a hand on the small of your back as you dance. So I'm going to stop there. Go to Cuba now before it changes too much. That's all I have to say about that. Do you still have spots in your class? Your trip is
Talk
full.
more into the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The people in the back missed the last
Can you guys
part.
not hear me back there? You can all hear me? Okay, great. I project.
Good.
Yeah, go to Cuba now. So I have the distinct opportunity and privilege of introducing Lisa Alpine, who has been for a long time a really wonderful beacon of inspiration in the travel writing tribe, San Francisco. And she's going to be reading a sliver from Fish Trader Ray, which was a winner of the Solis Silver Award for Best Travel Story. She's the author of Wildlife, Travel Adventures of a Worldly Woman, and Exotic Life, Travel Tales of an Adventurous Woman. She's also the host of the Titillating Adventure Stories, as told by an all-star cast series at the Mill Valley Library and Book Passage. And here she is. Give her a big warm welcome.
Fish Trader Ray. Sorry.
Short.
Yay. Good.
Fish Trader Ray takes place in the Amazon, on my first trip to the Amazon in 1974. And I'm going to start in the middle of the story. This further heightened my desire to get out of town pronto and return to the green tangle of the jungle. Give me poisonous bugs, blood-sucking bats, carnivorous fish, and strangling snakes anytime over men with guns. Ray, I really don't want to stay here. I'd love to spend time with you and your family, but this place scares me. Do you have any suggestions for how I might get farther into the backwaters of the Amazon? I want to see the rarer flora and fauna and then head toward Brazil and Carnaval. I've been practicing my samba steps. He nodded sympathetically and said, Leticia is a very dangerous place. I got to do it with a southern accent because he was from Texas. There's a mail boat traveling downriver, leaving late this afternoon. My buddy Marco, the captain, will drop you off at Flores, about a 2-day boat ride from here, on one of the more obscure branches of the Japura. She collects exotic aquarium fish for me and welcomes visitors. We walked back down to the wharf and got me settled into Marcos's 20-foot-long panga. He waved goodbye with his weather-worn Panama hat, surrounded by his retinue of barefoot children and his short, stoic native wife. Another gunshot emanated from the stilt bar, As if a starting pistol was announcing our departure, Leticia quickly and thankfully faded into the distance. That town was no place for a young woman, unless she was plying her trade. The sunset across the 20-mile expanse of the Amazon River was a fantastical light show of tangerine spectral colors. The sultry water's surface shimmered in a coppery peach glow. I curled up on a lumpy sack of mail, appreciating the tranquility, and dreamily watched as the constellation of the Southern Cross faintly appeared in the gloaming of twilight. We chugged along the sluggish waters of the Amazon River with dozens of other craft, from slipper-sized dugouts paddled by plumage-bedecked natives to rusty cargo container ships struggling upstream to Iquitos or Pucallpa. My only company in the stern of the boat were a wild peccary in a slat cage, who thankfully gave up squealing after a few hours, and Marcos's pet capuchin monkey, who made game out of looking for nits on my scalp. His gentle preening soothed me during the hazy, heat-baked day. I had to lay on my pack as the mischievous monkey also enjoyed digging through it with his dexterous digits, squeezing out the toothpaste or chewing on the soap bar. His most naughty and annoying trick was absconding with my silky underwear, placing it on his head like a beret and keeping just out of my grasp. We shared a passion for cashews and boiled palm nuts that I cut up and fed to him. He was too cute to be mad at for very long, especially when he innocently batted his cold black eyelashes at me. Toward the end of the second day, we detoured up a coffee-colored river confluence and into narrower tributaries. Finally arriving at a small hut on stilts above the riparian jungle terrain. There was no terra firma to disembark on, so we motored right up to the porch railing. Marco introduced me to a compact, smiling woman with bright white teeth, mocha-toned skin, and peculiar pale green-blue eyes that flashed an invitation of friendship. Flora reached down, gave me her calloused hand, and hauled me up from the boat's rim into her 12-square-foot thatched roof shack. Marco confirmed he would come get me in a week and hook me up with a ride to Manaus, midway between Leticia and the mouth of the Amazon River in Belém, where a bus would provide transport to Bahia in about 3 days. Just in time for Carnaval, he emphasized as he shoved off, in a hurry to get back to the main river branch and visit his family. The monkey screeched goodbye with a furrowed brow as he watched me and my pack contents fade into the dusk. He was wearing something on his head. Flora seemed pleased to have me as a guest. She was isolated here with just her 3 young children, all under age 5, for company. Her only social life, the occasional visitor Ray sent, or the infrequent passing trader. The tribe she came from lived much farther upriver, and she never saw them. I never asked why she lived there by herself, but I got the impression she was an outcast due to her mixed blood. She spoke passable Spanish, so we communicated easily. I agreed to contribute to the food kitty and also help her with household chores, fishing, foraging, and childcare. When we weren't out fishing, we cooked, swept, wove baskets, and lounged in the hammocks, sharing stories and braiding my hair. The kids were fascinated by my back-length blonde tresses and fooled with them constantly. I teased they should open up a beauty salon. This sent them into giggle fits, as Flora and I were the only women for many miles in this riverine no-man's land. Flora's gypsy canoe was the only way to get around. Carved out of a single tree trunk, it floated just a ½ an inch above the waterline. Balance is essential when we sat, stood, or paddled. At night, after the children were asleep, we'd slip into the dugout with flashlights and glide silently into the lagoons surrounding the shack, looking for black caiman. Their eyes glowed a spooky citron green in the distance like iridescent marbles, hovering right above the obsidian dark waters. We'd quickly shine the flashlights into their eyes to mesmerize them before they disappeared below the surface. Then we'd paddle over and gently tap on their prehistoric bony heads. This would break the spell, and plop, they'd sink underneath the inky water. That was about it for nightly entertainment. when not rolling the dice for his gambling column in the San Francisco Chronicle, Michael Shapiro is a frequent contributor to National Geographic Traveler and Islands Magazine. He's also the author of A Sense of Place, which is a wonderful book about interviewing writers, travel writers around the world. It's really special. He got to Dervla Murphy's not in that book.
She's the one that got away.
Dervla Murphy. Okay, anyway. But he did interview her after that. And another book that he's authored the text for a photo book called Guatemala, A Journey Through the Land of the Maya.
Just a quick announcement before Michael comes up. Don George lives in... No. Really, I'm not introducing him today, no matter what happens. There's a black truck, I am told, out in the parking lot with its ignition key still in the passenger door.
Ooh.
If that's any of you, you might want to go check it out. Otherwise, Michael Shapiro.
Or you need a black truck. I still get a little nervous when I come out on the stage, but I have a talisman that helps me calm down. This is my name tag from the last book passage. I'm gonna wear it. So, my story is about Dylan Thomas and the 100th anniversary of his book, of his birth, which was last fall. And these are my dollar store glasses. This is not a museum, says Annie Hayden, the vivacious Dylan Thomas enthusiast who has restored the Welsh poet's childhood home in Swansea, an industrial city on Wales' south coast. I'm the oldest thing in this house. About 60 years old, Annie, who tells me to call her by her first name, is displaying some Welsh hyperbole. She's not the oldest thing in this loving memorial of Wales' best-loved English-language poet. There's a typewriter from the 1920s, colorful drawings based on phrases from Thomas's poetry, antique copper kettles, even oblong filament light bulbs that looked like something fashioned by Thomas Edison. But she's right, it's not a museum. Annie, who has spent years refurbishing Thomas's first home, is intent on making this a living, breathing house, a place where the writer's admirers can eat, drink, recite poetry, play music, and stay the night. Would you like a drink, she asked me. It is a Thomas house, after all. I visited the nation as Wales was gearing up to celebrate the centennial of Thomas's 1914 birth, so I thought I'd explore the coastal homes where he wrote and found solace, the beaches that made his spirits soar, and perhaps a favorite pub or bookstore. Like many of his countrymen, I appreciate Thomas's work, though I can't say I fully comprehend it all. I'm hoping that visiting places that shaped and inspired him will give me a deeper understanding of the artist and his words. Thomas, who died before his 40th birthday, is often remembered as much for his excessive drinking and womanizing as for his art, but his poems, including Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, which he wrote for his dying father, have stood the test of time. I arrive on a rainy afternoon a few hours after touching down at London's Heathrow. The brick red tiles in the entryway are so worn they are noticeably bowed. We didn't want to restore it because it's part of the history of the house, Annie says. She puts a copper kettle on the stove. The time between the Great Wars, when Dylan grew up, Annie says, was an era when people never got rid of stuff like old copper kettles. People see relics and say, my gran had one of those. That brings them right in. As we talk over tea about the home's restoration, I can tell Annie loves words as much as Thomas did. I'm a stripper, she says, pausing for effect, and scrubber of wood. She looks me up and down and says, how tall are you? I tell her I'm 5'5". Well then, you're half an inch taller than Dylan. I concede I'm really 5'4" and a half. She seems pleased that I'm the same height as her beloved bard. I know Dylan, she says. I'm his mother now. Then Dylan's mother retreats to the kitchen to bring out lamb that's come 9 miles to be with us tonight, she says. Fresh pastry-crusted salmon from the nearby River Tau, and potatoes and a divine bottle of French Côte de Rhône. I suggest the house is a labor of love, but Annie is quick to correct me. It's a labor born of frustration, she says. This boy of ours hasn't been acknowledged as he should be. Annie says I can choose where I'll sleep and invites me to stay in Dylan's tiny boyhood room. But the room is barely bigger than the single bed, so I opt for the guest room at the front of the house, which young Dylan called the best room. Overlooking Cumdonkin Park, where Dylan's legs and imagination ran free, the spacious best room has a fireplace and brass candlesticks, a sink with a pitcher for wash water, a photo of Dylan and his wife, and a little crib. A book of Thomas's poems waits on the nightstand. There's a part I had cut out which talks about this is actually the room in which Dylan was born, so it's very special to stay the night in this room. Thomas wrote hundreds of poems in this house, with his greatest output coming between the ages of 16 and 20. He worked in the morning and drank late. Unfortunately, Thomas couldn't hold his alcohol, perhaps because he's now believed to be a diabetic, so he became a, quote, performing monkey, Annie says. Like a protective mother, she denies that Thomas was an alcoholic. There's such a lot of work of such high quality that alcoholism is not considered. I refrain from listing all the great writers who overindulged in alcohol. Annie refills my glass with Côte de Rhône, and I ask about Thomas's most famous poem, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, written as Dylan's father, a frustrated poet, lay dying. Listen to it from a child's point of view, Annie says, referring to the line, Curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. His father wouldn't give Dylan the words he needed, like, well done, or I'm proud of you. The work between father and son wasn't finished. At Swansea's Dylan Thomas Center, a stone's throw from the Bristol Channel, Thomas's voice is projected through speakers in the ceilings. As I listen, I understand that, similar to James Joyce, the best way to comprehend Thomas is to hear his work read aloud, ideally in his own voice. Thomas's work has been called thrillingly incomprehensible, but I can hear what the Welsh called hiraeth, an ineffable longing, and it all starts to make sense. Read aloud, Thomas's poetry becomes music, which makes me think that Bob Dylan, who took his name from this Welsh poet, is his natural heir, a musician who turns songs into poetry. I just have about 3 more paragraphs, and I have a request to make of a person in the audience. I attended the very first Book Passage Conference in 1992, and I finished runner-up to Linda Watanabe McFerrin, who couldn't be here today. But I think the best part of having won that contest would be to have Don George read your work. So Don, would you be willing to read the last 3 or 4 drafts of this?
I thought I was done.
It's just from here, and there's a name, a Welsh name, Ifor ap Dafydd.
Ifor ap Dafydd.
Other than that,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you.
After almost a week in Dylan Thomas's Wales, I have a much better sense of the poet. But there's one last place I feel compelled to visit. The stately National Library of Wales in Aberystwyth, where some of Thomas's possessions remain. I sit with the curator with the delightfully Welsh name of Ifor ap Dafydd in a high-ceilinged room. Ap Dafydd shows me a map of downtown Swansea that Thomas drew, a betting slip with odds on horses, a Pan-American airline ticket, and a letter to his uncle thanking him for a gift and praising the Disney movie Dumbo. The curator then unwraps a leather wallet containing Thomas's passport. Can I hold it? I ask. Ap Dafydd hesitates, then consents. I slowly turn the yellowed pages and see stamps for France, Italy, and Iran, where Thomas traveled in 1951 to write a script for the Anglo-Iranian oil company. Then there's the final stamp. A New York entry into the US in 1953, where 5 days after allegedly boasting he knocked back 18 whiskeys, a record, Thomas died at St. Vincent's Hospital. After that last stamp, the better part of the passport is blank. No mark of a return to Britain. I survey the grand room in this house of words that Thomas helped build. So many empty pages, I say in a low voice, as a wave of sadness washes over me. So many pages left unfilled.
One postscript to that story is, thanks again, Donna, that was really fun. One postscript to that story is, I got a letter, that story ran in the Washington Post, and I got a letter from a man who said, in 1953, I was a supervisor at what was, I think, then called Idlewild Airport. It wasn't JFK yet, at the customs office, and there was a rather disheveled man trying to get through customs, and the customs officer wasn't letting him through. And so I came over, and I had been familiar with Dylan Thomas's poetry, and I knew what he looked like. And I said, this is somebody who is most welcome in our country. So he said I expedited Dylan Thomas's entry into that country, and that was the trip. 5 days later, he had overdosed on alcohol and died in a hospital a couple days after that. Anyway, to shift gears, it is
Very hard act to follow.
No, blame Dawn. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Amy Gigi Alexander. She came onto this travel writing scene like a comet that had never been even known about before. Most of us here met her a year and a half ago at the 2013 Book Passage Travel Writers Conference. And she won the contest. They have a contest that the winning travel writer, as we mentioned earlier, has their story read by Dawn, and there's a prize. And ever since then, I've been reading one story after another from Amy, either online. I believe you were in a Nat Geo India publication, is that right? Or I see her byline in a lot of places right now. And I got home last night around 12, and I checked my email, and I just got an email saying the Solus Awards had been announced. And by the way, that's not spelled Soulles. It's Solas, which I believe is Irish for spirit. Light. Close. Anyway, Amy is a phenomenal writer. She speaks from the heart. She's touched a lot of lives, and I know she's going to touch a lot more. So congratulations on this wonderful award, and now it's the audience's treat to hear you.
Oh my God.
Up higher, because like much higher. Well, it's very overwhelming to be here. It was 20 months ago I came here. I didn't even want to come to the Book Passes Travel Conference. A friend asked me to go, and I came, and I won, and they said my life would change. And I always just wrote for myself, and then suddenly now I write for a lot of places, and my life is just completely different. And I highly recommend that you go to that conference, because when they say it's life-changing, it really is. And you actually gain allies and friends and kind of a membership into a group of phenomenal people that help you in every single way. It's like I gained like 100 mentors. Every time I have to make a decision, I have 100 people I can ask, and it's been amazing. I also have Dollar Tree sunglasses. This is an essay I wrote about a time when I was in my late 20s, and I was diagnosed with cancer, and I had uterine, ovarian, and lymphatic cancer, and only had 3 months to live. And I had been going to chemo, and it's a travel story, but it's also just a story of transformation, which I think is what travel does. It transforms you. It's called The Bloom of Cancer. Let me know, can you hear me? I haven't done this before, so. The Bloom of Cancer.
15 years ago, I wrote a wish list at a time when I thought my life would either be taken by cancer or by my own hand. I'd been ill for several years due to tumors growing like trees in my body, their branches twisting my organs until they stopped working. Many surgeries later, the tumors had all been removed except for small pieces, which I'd hoped would die on their own. But instead they returned, stronger, hungrier, consuming everything and consuming me. My body was not owned by me during that time. I was only an anxious observer who worried about bills that lay unopened on the kitchen table next to printouts of platelet counts. Exhausted by medications, angered by doctors, I spent my days terrified, my nights in a dull, dreamless sleep. Cancer is a lonely business. People don't really understand what cancer means. Sometimes it means you will die. It is not popular to say so, but it is true. Everyone tells you you will beat it, but no one wants to talk to you about the fact that you might not. But you have this truth with you every day. You wake up in the morning and it is there. It follows you wherever you are, this unnerving feeling that you are rotting inside. It stares back at you in your vanity mirror as you brush your teeth, making you cover all the mirrors in your house. It sits next to you as you drink your liquid meal replacement because you can't eat solid food anymore. It crawls into the phone lines as you try to talk to friends, contaminating the conversation until you give up and stop calling anyone at all. One morning, I realized I had to make a choice, end life or find life. I remember that day so well that I can recall details from it still. I was lying on the floor of my living room, and I was cold because the fire in the wood stove had gone out and I didn't care. I was so ill I'd soiled my clothes with urine because by then I'd become incontinent. My hair was tangled and dirty since I hadn't showered in over a week. I had on a maternity dress that someone had given me, an ugly flesh-colored peach dress, the color of a Band-Aid, and I hated it. My tumors had come back, and my abdomen was so swollen I couldn't wear any of my own clothes. My dog was hungry and pawing at the back door, and I made myself get up to feed him. And then I saw how he looked at me. His eyes were wide and alert to a stranger, me. I went and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror and saw someone in hell. Right then, I knew I had to pull myself together. There was no one else to do it but me. I canceled my chemo. I threw away the medications. Driving out into the countryside with my journal and a blanket, I stretched myself out in a field surrounded by sheep and sunshine. It was in that same field that my bucket list was born, a list that kept me alive and saved my soul from sorrow. From the start, I knew my list had to be that of a visionary. Impossible tasks, a maze of places and things that required my full participation and a belief in the magical qualities of the universe. Choosing tasks that were far away or took a long time to accomplish meant promising myself to be healthy and whole again. I knew that I needed a list that would propel me out into the world, shot like a cannon into a neighboring country, led only by the desire to have more time. I wrote until the night dimmed, the grass buzzed with insects, the way back to my car hard to find. But while creating that bucket list, my pain, my aloneness, and my fears were replaced with a gift of forgetting. I forgot who I was and decided who I would become. Once home, I taped copies of my new bucket list everywhere. The refrigerator, the bathroom mirror, the dash of my car. I tore the list into narrow strips, one task on each bookmark, placing them in every book I owned, my wallet and silverware drawer. Slips of paper everywhere, reminding me that I needed to live, scribbled with jumbled words, wishes. Skydive solo in the Nevada desert just after sunrise. Spend an entire day at the top of the Empire State Building and have a 5-star meal delivered. Jump off a pirate boat into the sea. Build a cross on the top of a mountain along the Camino de Santiago. Nap in Vita Sackville West White Garden while reading Virginia Woolf. Become a Buddhist monk. Feel quicksand. Join a Catholic order of nuns. Be entirely alone in a desolate landscape of another country. Snowshoe in Canada. Be the star of a parade. Eat dinner with a famous artist. Work on a banana plantation. It's my favorite one coming. Plaster a city with poems in the middle of the night. Ride a train car to an unknown destination. Spend the night at the bottom of the Grand Canyon with an astronomer who can explain the stars to me. Travel around the world alone and take my time. Be an artist. Experience nature and see everything. These and hundreds more prompts to do the things of my wildest imaginings, crazy dreams that required endless resources of time and money I did not have. I was still sick, but my days were full of plans and preparations, and I began whittling down the list with surprising success in no particular order. Some things were hard to manage, but explanations usually opened doors. Money was useful, but not entirely important. The sheer will needed to actually do something seemed to make it possible to do it, whether it was expensive or not. Other tasks proved impossible, or ridiculous in retrospect. Pirate ships were terribly hard to find. And the top of the Empire State Building didn't allow food of any kind, so I had to make do with a hastily gobbled hot dog that I smuggled in under my jacket. Sometimes I changed my mind. Being a nun sounded lovely until I realized I couldn't wear lip gloss. And snowshoeing turned out to be more torture than fun. The list kept me alive. I didn't think about being sick anymore. I treated my body like it was well, forcing it to do things it had never done. Skydiving, whitewater rafting, ballroom dancing. And 6 months later, somewhere between talking stars with an astronomer in the Grand Canyon and almost getting arrested for plastering poems on streetlight posts in my city at 2 a.m., I felt better. The doctors told me I was better too, the cancer was gone. The bucket list had become a tool that changed me from someone who had obsessed about mere surviving into a strong woman who didn't care so much about living as she did about thriving. I had bloomed. Stop there. I mean, I can't even believe I'm in this book with these amazing people, really. It's like it's a huge miracle for me. Jill, when I think of Jill, I think of her in a bikini in a Shark Tank. I think of her crossing Patagonia or having like enormous outdoor adventures, jumping out of planes, hang gliding. But here it's much simpler in her bio. Jill Robinson is a freelance writer and photographer. Her work has appeared in the San Francisco Chronicle, Afar, National Geographic Traveler, American Way, Every Day with Rachel Ray, The Rob Report, Coastal Living, and more. She's an amazing woman, and it's a phenomenal experience to be in a book with you, Jill.
For shorter. Okay. Unfortunately, my mom also thinks of me like Gigi does and jumping out of airplanes. So when I told her yesterday I was going to do some heli skiing later this month, she said, "You're jumping out of a helicopter to ski?" And I'm like, no. So I explained, and she feels a lot better. So my story, I've cut a few pieces out so that you can discover them later in the book, but it's called Friends Who Don't Bite. This is also something I didn't tell my mom about until after it happened. The olive color of the black mamba can't be ignored. It's the last thing I want to see in Namibia, and it's under my car. I perch on a picnic table at a tiny rest stop 30 miles north of Otjiwarongo with my eye on the snake, knowing better than to throw something to scare it off. Tall grass punctuated with sprawling trees lines each side of the highway, and what lies beyond is protected by cyclone fencing. After 10 minutes of waiting for the snake to move, a truck turns off the road. "Are you having trouble with your vehicle?" asks the man. "In a way," I respond. "I've got a mamba under my car." The man introduces himself as Solomon, a Namibian wildlife guide, and asks if I have binoculars so he can check my claim. My binoculars are in the car. I hand him my camera, he looks through the lens, grunts, and gives it back. "Indeed, that's what he is," says Solomon. "We're here for a while." "Do you have lunch?" I reply that I have a great lunch, but it's sitting in the car next to my binoculars. Solomon strides back to his truck, reaches inside, and pulls out a bag and cooler. In less than a minute, he set the picnic table and laid out his meal to share with me. Noticing that the presence of the snake makes me nervous, Solomon asks me why. Surprised by his question, I sputter a little with my response about the mamba's aggression and venom. I omit telling him that only recently have I gotten a lifelong snake phobia under control. But I still get shivers when I see a photo of a black mamba. Having a live one this close to me is unnerving. But right now, he is your friend, Solomon advised. Everyone is already your friend. The snake, the elephant, the leopard, the stranger. They are only not your friend if they hurt you. I counter his optimism. It's hard to overcome irrational fears, especially when potential danger is involved. Solomon nods and points out there were two seemingly opposing animals in the world's wilderness. But here I am, an African man, talking to you, a blonde California woman, out in the middle of nowhere in Namibia. Nobody is here to help if things go badly, and many people think that's the only way this scenario can end, as if Africa is too dangerous to bother trusting. You've trusted Namibia, so you can trust our mamba friend, but that doesn't mean you do it without caution. We enjoy his lunch of barbecued chicken, corn, and garlic bread that he packed for a break in his 6-hour drive. The cooler is packed with frosty bottles of Hansa Urbach, a Bock beer that gives a subtle nod to the country's German settlers. A glance at my car tells us that the mamba is still there, so we each open a beer and toast to friends who don't bite. Back at home, he says, if you have car trouble, do you wait for help? I remember my father's lessons in changing tires back when I was 15. Yes, I explain. However, the person who comes to help is usually a mechanic who I call. Strangers don't usually bother, thinking it's not their responsibility, and we are often too wrapped up in our own lives to think about others. Solomon sighs and silently points at the towering neck and head of a giraffe in the distance. He smiles when he sees my eyes widen, as if I'm 5 years old. If we help each other, he says, there is more time for wonder, like that giraffe. How many have you seen in Namibia so far? I reply that I've seen perhaps 30, but every time I spy another animal, no matter if it's an elephant, leopard, cheetah, honey badger, oryx, jackal, or baboon, it's as if I've seen it for the first time. The excitement never wanes. That's how it should be with everything, he says, and looks into the distance after the giraffe. Solomon digs in his pocket and pulls out a photo of his daughter, a 4-year-old dressed in a rainbow t-shirt and red shorts, her eyes lit up by her smile. I ask if she's in school today. Pardon me. No, says Solomon. She was with her mother this week. We don't live together anymore, so Beata takes turns with us. I stop asking questions, thinking I've gotten too personal, but he continues. My wife left to be with my best friend shortly after the baby came. I want to understand, especially for Beata, but it's not always easy, he says, as he absent-mindedly taps his finger on the neck of his beer bottle. I'm sorry, I reply. When people you trust hurt you, it's hard to let them remain in your life without worrying about them doing it again. I tell him that I lost a friend, someone that I trusted as well, and while we remained in occasional contact, our friendship was not the same. It was far from easy, and at first I wanted to hurt him back in retaliation. But the experience made me pay more attention to others' suffering, as if my pain allowed me to see the pain of other people more clearly, and that made my anguish slowly fade. Solomon smiles, and I recognize Beata's smile as his. I feel the same way, he says. It has made me sad, but how can I say no to the joy of my daughter, my friends, and this wide world? We look over the car for our regular snake check. The mamba is gone. I silently hope it hasn't crawled into my car's undercarriage, but don't want Solomon to know that I still don't trust the snake completely. As we pack up his gear, Solomon pulls some ostrich shell beads from a package in his trunk, opens my hand, and places them gently in my palm. Your friends are more than these, he says, as he closes my fingers over the beads. See them everywhere they are, and you will be happy. He walks me to my car, and as I drive away, I see him waving. He is an unexpected teacher on my travels, one who has allowed me to see more clearly the things I can leave behind. I choose to believe his happy outlook is more innocence than naivete. Far ahead of me on the road, a family of warthogs runs across my path. I begin to think like Solomon. They are all my friends, so I slow down and drive with caution. up and give you a couple more comments before we let you go.
Thank you. What wonderful stories. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for coming. There are two other local writers who I didn't mention who have stories in the book who can't be here. Tanya Amachov is in India at the moment, and Erin Byrne left yesterday for Paris, and she's there now. Erin wrote a story called Story Keepers, and it is in the book, of course. It's a wonderful story about a Parisian man who for decades has been keeping the memory alive of American soldiers in Paris, some of whom died and some of whom survived. It's a remarkable story about these people who nobody knew anything about, but this Parisian man, when he was a kid, saw a plane shot down over Paris, and as he grew up, he wondered what happened to the Americans who were in that plane. Now, Erin has made a documentary film about it, and I have postcards up here. She'll be showing it in May somewhere in the Bay Area. If you're interested in the film, please take a postcard with you. I'll leave them on the table up here. So with that, I would like to invite all of you to help us celebrate. There's wine and snacks in the back. Jeff?
Larry, I feel really bad that I forgot to bring the sheet with introductions. Could you just please let people know who Lavinia really is?
You don't have to. I love y'all though. I loved his introduction.
I thought it was great. I thought it
I want
was
people to know about the best
It
women.
was all true.
Well, yeah, Lavinia Spalding. 7.5 months pregnant. Lavinia is the editor of The Best Women's Travel Writing, which is the companion collection to The Best Travel Writing. And she's an extraordinary writer and a very gifted individual. And we're thrilled to have her among our group. And one of the best things for me personally about all of this is to be able to be up here and be involved with all of my friends. That, just be able to do this kind of work and have all these people come up here and participate. And it's just a big thrill. Just like the travel conference, it is just a big thrill because it becomes a big family and a bunch of friends. And it's really wonderful. We have a great writing community in the San Francisco Bay Area. So with that, why don't we grab a glass of wine, celebrate. If you have any questions, we'll do a Q&A over a glass of wine. Just talk to anybody you want to. Get your books and get them signed. And thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.